Okay, this will be chapter 15 in the body of Christopher Creed. Allie walked all the way to our house after school because she didn't want to get on my school bus and start more talk. She had on her army boots, which turned out not to be real leather. They were soaked through and sort of ruined, and she had these enormous bleeding blisters on her feet. While she sat on the bathtub ledge and soaked them, she told me that Beau had been charged with juvenile delinquency again, this time for making that phone call. I didn't think juvenile delinquency was such a big deal. Then she explained to me that it is the only thing a minor can be charged with, even if he commits a murder. So it could get bad, depending on how Mr. and Mrs. Creed and the cops played it out. He could do up to 6 months in Jamesburg for the extortion part. I swore to her that I would tell the truth, and that just made her wig further. She swore that if I confessed, she would call me a liar and confess to making the call herself. I didn't know what to do. We went into the family room, arguing about it. Then the phone rang, and Ellie was so wound up she jumped 10 feet in the air, then picked up without thinking, and it was Leandra. "Is that Allie McDermott?" she demanded when Allie passed the phone off to me in total panic. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes. It was along the lines of, "Leandra, please." I was just watching Allie's eyes rolling back in her head almost because this was too much. Leandra hollered through a sniff, "I guess I know who's been making Allie late for cheerleading practice every day." It wasn't like I could say it was Beau Richardson and not me. I said, "Leandra, that's bullshit. She just said, well, Allie's not here at cheerleading and you're not at football practice, so I came home sick," I defended myself. "You went home guilty, that's what. No wonder you can't look your friends in the eye," and she hung up. I got my football practice in anyway because I had to tackle Allie in the front yard to keep her from running off. I lay on her chest and shushed her while she screamed, "I can't stay here. I can't stay here." After 15 shushes, she cried a bunch, and I was afraid to get off of her until she stopped for fear she'd take off into the woods. We lay there for an eternity. When she was finally just sniffing, she turned her head from keeping her face halfway in the grass and looked at me. "Tori," she asked, "do you think I'm a slut?" I rolled off her on that note. I hadn't been wanting to think of her in terms of sex, but it's hard not to think that way when you're lying on some girl. I sat on the grass staring at it, trying to catch a full breath. "No," I said finally. "I think you're confused and pissed off." She eased up some and sighed. "I don't know what I am. My mom has so many boyfriends. I wonder if it's genetic." I didn't have a clue. I finally said, "If it were genetic, if it were something like you just get incredibly horny all the time, then it wouldn't make sense. It seems like your mom could have taken out horniness on your dad." "It's got nothing to do with being horny," she told me. God, I don't think I've ever been horny. I always thought horny and sex went together like hungry and food. So then, what's up? I pretended to be all interested in a blade of grass. "I don't know. For one thing, I really love to piss off my dad. As flirty as my mom is, he's like the opposite. He's sort of pristine." "So he knows?" She looked at me like I was crazy. "No way. It would kill him. I want to piss him off for leaving me and Greg to cope with Mom. I don't want to send him into cardiac arrest or something. So what's the point?" I couldn't see how she planned to make him mad if he never even knew. She sighed. "I guess it's just the point that if he knew, it makes me feel like laughing sometimes. It's like the only way in my life I've ever been mean to somebody." "Allie," he trailed off, thinking she was being a lot meaner to herself. "Yeah, I know it's hard to understand," she admitted. "It's hard for me to understand, and I'm not even perfect like you." "Christ's sake, Allie, I don't feel like starting up on that again." My life wasn't perfect anymore, so she was going to start in on my character. "No way. You don't have a clue how weird I am. Nobody does. I'll lie on my bed for hours just thinking." "Well, I don't think that's weird," she said with a shrug. "I do," I argued. "I'm not sleeping. I'm not moving. I'm just lying there thinking, and it's about stuff that nobody else would care about." "Like what?" I shrugged, recalling the morning last week I woke up at 6 and lay in bed until 7. "What it would feel like to be drawn and quartered between 4 horses?" I confessed. I had seen some old movie on late night where this 15th century guy had been tied between 4 horses. At the same time, the riders all took off, galloping in 4 different directions. I had to lie there figuring the thing from 6 until 7, where he got separated, at the waist or the legs or the arms, and how long he could have stayed conscious. God, that's terrible, Allie breathed. I guess she knew what drawn and quartered meant. I kept going, and especially since all this came down with Creed, I just feel different from everybody else all of a sudden. Nobody else seems to think about how he is. Did you ever notice that? Everybody wants to know where he is, but I haven't heard one person wonder about how he is, unless they're saying that he's dead. I feel like the only one, and then I figure it must be me. I must be weird. I feel like a secret weirdo, like it's this giant secret, and one day somebody's going to realize and spew it all over the cafeteria in mega volume. Everybody take a long look at Tori Adams. He's weird. And we just never realized it. And the truth will be out. I could feel her turn, but I was too embarrassed to look at her. I wished I hadn't said all that. Finally, she said, Tori, everyone around here has a secret. You know that girl I was talking to on the bus this morning? The brainy one that's so quiet and gets all those straight A's? Her mom is an alcoholic. The girl keeps her head chronically in a school book because it's not as weird as the real world. You know Mike Healy from football? During the off-season, his dad makes him swim behind a rowboat while he keeps track of Mike's time. If Mike doesn't do good enough, his dad hangs the stopwatch in front of the TV in Mike's bedroom, so he'll swim better the next day. That's sick, I thought. I wondered how she knew that stuff. Before I had a chance to ask her, she went on. You know Lyle Corsica? You think he doesn't have friends because he's skinny and small? Well, Mark Fine is skinny and small, but he's a catcher on the baseball team, and everybody thinks he's okay. Lyle Corsica doesn't have friends because he still wets the bed, and he's afraid to get too close to people because somebody will find out. Everybody feels weird, Tori. Whoa, I stopped her. I was seeing how deep her bank of secrets went. I had thought it was just Creed and Bo that she kept quiet about. How do you know all this? I asked her. She was pulling grass out by the tips, but there was getting to be a whole clump of ground there. I grabbed her hand to stop it. Because, she sighed, my mom slept with all their dads, and they told her, and she told me. She collapsed backwards on the grass and stared sadly at the sky. I collapsed backwards, too. Bo called after dinner, and I let Allie take my cordless phone into her room. I went down to see what was on TV. I had to pass my mom's office, and she was in there, writing at her desk. My mom has been writing with a feather pen since I can remember, and as a little kid I used to sit on her couch and watch that feather waggle as the pen flew across the paper. Once I asked her why she didn't email Grandma or something more practical. She gave me some spiel about how writing letters to Grandma had become her tradition, and that traditions gave you a feeling of sanity and security, even if they weren't practical. I felt like everything was changing in the world, except my mother and that stupid pen. You feel better? She asked without looking up. Yeah, some. I watched the feather bob, kind of hypnotized by it. Ellie's mom went to the spa in Florida. I caught a click in her voice, like she was intentionally trying not to sound too concerned. It's about 2 miles up the road from where Allie's grandmother lives. About 10 miles from your grandma. She'll be there for 2 weeks. I told her that Allie and Greg could stay with us. I hope that's all right with you. None of us really wants Allie staying alone. I wondered what that meant. I wondered if she'd found out about Allie's sex tricks. Maybe Mrs. McDermott knew and spilled the beans to Mom. I wasn't about to ask. It's fine. I shrugged, but wondered how I could stand having some little kid in my room all that time. For Allie, I could do it. What's a spa? Like a health club? Actually, Mrs. McDermott and her mother call it the spa. But there's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation unit in there, and that's where Mrs. McDermott is. I glanced at her and watched that pen move again. Mrs. McDermott is addicted to drugs? I guess that's good. I thought she was just crazy. My mom let out a slight laugh. I've been with the DA's office a long time now. 90% of the time, inappropriate behavior and crimes are linked to 2 things, drugs and alcohol. I guess that made good sense. So, what did you say to her today? She squirmed uncomfortably. Not a whole lot. Some people know when the game is up. Some people want the game to be up. and they're just waiting for someone to step in and blow the whistle. I stared at the wood floor until the slits became double slits somehow. Everybody in town has a skeleton in the closet. True, she said. I was just repeating Allie, but I was surprised how quickly Mom agreed with me. I watched her and toyed around with telling her that I had made the phone call, not Bo. I knew I had to get Bo off the hook, but I got scared Allie would start in like she'd promised and say that she had made the phone call. I had disguised my voice when Mrs. Creed answered, half snarl, half whisper, and I wasn't sure you could tell it was a guy. I got to the point where I was ready to blurt it out to my mom when I heard a noise behind me. Allie was standing there looking kind of awkward. This wasn't the time. I sighed, feeling hungry all of a sudden. My dad had made chili for dinner, and all those spices gave it the appeal of a pile of thumbtacks. I had basically pushed it around in the bowl. Can I walk down to Wawa for some of that macaroni and cheese? My mom reached around for her handbag and pulled out a $5. Allie, do you want anything? Allie shook her head as I stood there looking at the $5, feeling a little strange. I didn't want to take money from my mom, not while I was lying about that phone call, and Allie and I were lying about the diary. All these lies! But I took it anyway. I felt Mom watching me as Allie and I put on our jackets and headed out the door. And that is chapter 15 of The Body of Christopher Creed.